So this is an attempt to explain observer pattern with a very simple example. So let's assume you're an IoT developer, Internet of Things developer, and you're working for a project, and the project is quite simple. You'll have to create a fire trigger alarm. So you have a smoke sensor that detects smoke, and once smoke is detected, you'll have to trigger the fire alarm. So for this simple system, the simplest idea that we have is, let's assume that every smoke sensor has a fire alarm, and on when the smoke is detected, then we simply trigger the fire alarm. So there's a detect smoke method over here. Whenever that is triggered, whenever there is smoke detected, then we trigger the fire alarm. We have fire alarm object here, and this will trigger the trigger method here, right? So let's assume we have a smart company, and the smart company uh, will have the objects of both smoke sensor as well as the fire alarm. Uh, so smoke sensor will have a fire alarm, and this fire alarm is being set in the constructor of the smoke sensor. So in this case, let's assume right now we have a single smoke sensor and a single fire alarm, right? Later, when the company grows, let's assume, uh, so the company says they have 3 buildings, and in each building they have a separate smoke sensor and a separate fire alarm. These buildings are far from each other, so they don't need to trigger all the fire alarms if one of the smoke sensor is triggered, is detecting smoke, right? So let's assume we have 3 separate buildings, building A, B, and C. All of them are separate or in separate geographical locations. So in this case, what we do is we keep the code of smoke sensor and fire alarm as it is. Now that we have new fire alarms and new smoke sensors, we simply add the objects for that. So fire alarm A represents a building A, and smoke sensor A represents smoke sensor in building A, right? Uh, so later what happens is, in building B, it just had 1 floor earlier, they'll build another floor. So right now we have 2 floors in building B, and in that we have, let's assume, one sensor in the first floor and one sensor in the second floor, and one fire alarm in the first floor and one fire alarm in the second floor. So in this case, if the smoke sensor is detecting smoke in either of the 2 floors, we'll have to trigger the fire alarm for both the floors, right? So if any of the building B uh, fire alarm is getting triggered, then we'll have to like trigger both the fire alarms. So the earlier case where we have where each smoke sensor has a fire alarm, it fails here. So if we try to do this, only one fire alarm will be triggered with this code. So the code that I have here is building B first floor, fire alarm for building B first floor, and smoke sensor for building B first floor. Similarly, uh, building B second floor and second floor. So fire alarm and smoke sensor for second floor of building B. So if we use this code, if the first floor smoke sensor is triggered, then only the fire alarm of the first floor will be triggered. So this is not acceptable. So we'll have to design a better solution. So the simplest thing that we possibly can do is we can have a list of fire alarms, and all of them can be triggered. But what you're doing is essentially you're changing the code, and let's assume you have something else, like in the future uh, you may have to call the fire station, that you'll have to edit the code again, wherein uh, you'll have to add a fire station again, and the fire alarm that you have list of fire alarms right now, and in future it may be list of fire stations wherein you'll be calling the nearest fire station. So this is not this you'll have to there's a constant change here, so it'll be difficult for this code that we've written here. to scale up, right? So let's assume we have more requirements where we'll have to call fire station when any sensor is triggered, right? So in this case, observer pattern is something that can be very helpful. So this is the definition of observer pattern. The observer pattern defines a one-to-many dependency between objects so that when one object changes state, all of its dependents are notified and updated automatically, right? So this is the observer pattern. In the observer pattern, we have a subject and a observer. So uh, this is a this is an interface subject, and this is an interface observer. So what happens is uh, the subject will have an observer, and there's a relationship between this subject and this observer, and whenever uh, whenever we want to add an observer, we use this method called add observer. It's similar to subscribe observer and remove observer or unsubscribe observer. And we have notify observers, which if you notice it is notify observers, not notify observer. So you have a list of observers, and you can notify all the observers at once. So in this case, so if you observe here, we have smoke detector, which implements subject, right? And we have fire station, which implements observer, and fire alarm, which implements observer. We'll have to override all these methods, which are quite intuitive. So add observer will add the observers, and so it's you just have a list of observers, which is an array list, and you can add each observer here. In this case, fire station and fire alarm can be an observer, right? And you can remove an observer. So given an observer, you can remove it at any time. And notify observer is simply like if smoke is detected, then you have all the observers, you have a list of observers, and you'll have a for loop run through all the observers, and you'll call the update method with data. So what is data here? So uh, if you see here, there is something called sensor data here, right? So it doesn't have to be sensor data or data anything specific like this. It can be a plain string, or it can be nothing as well. Uh, but here I wanted it to have a similar field to event listener. So most of the software programmers must have used any kind of event listeners, right? You'll have uh, on click listener, etc. in the front end, and you must have seen a lot of event listeners if you are a Java programmer or JavaScript programmer, or maybe any other programmer as well. So in this case, you have a class which will have a private string event, and you'll have a reading sensor ID, which is not very relevant in this context. But so you'll have the event name, and based on the event name, you'll identify what event it is, right? Uh, so in this case, if you see here, the earlier example that I've explained here, right? You have two floors in a building, and if either of the sensor is triggered, both the alarms should be triggered, right? So here, if you see, this is the code that does that job. If you see here, you have a smoke sensor for building B first floor, and you'll add an observer which will be fire alarm building B first floor, and you'll add another observer which is fire alarm building B second floor. So you'll have another smoke sensor building B second floor. You'll add two observers again, fire alarm building B first floor, fire alarm building B second floor. So what happens is whenever either of the smoke sensor is detected, smoke is detected in either of the smoke sensors, then um, both the fire alarms will be triggered, right? So here I have added fire station as well. So this is just to explain how simple it is to add a new observer. You have fire station which implements observer interface, and you'll have to override the fire station. Here it is smoke detected. This is the event. Uh, you can call the fire station, right? Let's assume this will just call the fire station and this will just trigger the fire alarm. So let's assume right now you have all these, but in future, let's assume you have more requirements. Something like you have a motion sensor, and if motion sensor detects any motion, then you'll open a glass door, right? You might have seen in offices or anywhere around that you walk near the door and the door automatically opens. So this also in this case, the motion sensor will be the subject and glass door will be the observer. Uh, and this is again a very interesting requirement. When smoke sensor detects smoke, all the glass doors must be opened automatically. So you can simply uh, add an event listener in the Glassdoor class, uh, as in you can make it an observer, add the observer for every single smoke sensor you have, and if any of the smoke sensor in that particular building uh, gets I mean detects smoke, then you can open all the glass doors so that all the employees in the building can quickly evacuate, right? And so this is what I just said. So let's assume there are more requirements, something similar to this IoT requirements. So you have milk dispenser in your office, and when milk gets completed, it's finished, then you can have a sensor which will identify that milk is finished, and the grocery company can be an observer, and they'll get an event or update that milk is completed, and the grocery company can come and refill the milk in your dispenser, right? So this is observer pattern. Uh, so in short, you have a subject or a observable, and you have a observer, right? These are two interfaces, and you'll have to implement the subject or observable uh, to create a subject, and you'll have to implement an observer to create an observer. This is it. Thank you for listening.